So there was a question that came in after last month's talk. So I thought I would respond to it first and then pick up where we left off. Okay, so the question reads, I read His Holiness the Dalai Lama's book, How to Practice, where he wrote that the Buddha achieved enlightenment long before the 6th century BC and appeared at that time to demonstrate the path to sentient beings. This made me wonder why the Buddha, in contrast to bodhisattvas, did not continually manifest. Why, with such great compassion, does the Buddha not stay continuously to teach? Thank you for clearing up my lack of understanding. Okay, so the Buddha does appear, he can't help it because the compassion is so great, the wisdom is so great, the skillful means is so great that when there's a sentient being who is receptive karmically to being benefited, the Buddha will help in some way, according to how receptive that person is. But the Buddha doesn't always announce it. So if, a Buddha appears or takes, birth as this person or that person, or even an inanimate object, the Buddhas don't announce themselves. So they don't have little name tags saying, hi, I'm a Buddha manifesting for your benefit. Because that would not get through to us. They manifest in a particular form because that form is a way that they can get through to us. So the Buddhas do manifest. Now, what you may be thinking about in this question is that the Tibetans have a system of identifying the rebirths of various renowned and well-respected practitioners. And so sometimes those beings are, they're called tukus, which literally means the emanation body of a Buddha. But that doesn't mean that all of those people who are tukus or rinpoches are Buddhas or are bodhisattvas. Some of them may be manifestations of Buddhas or bodhisattvas. Some of them may be ordinary beings who, because of karma they created, are recognized in that kind of form. So this whole tuku system appearing in the Tibetan Buddhism, this was an invention, so to speak. It came out of Tibetan culture. None of the other Buddhist traditions have this, just in Tibetan Buddhism. And it is not only a way of identifying well-respected practitioners who have passed away and then been reborn, but in Tibetan society, it's also a way of passing down property. Because when you have a monk who is quite, well-respected and receives a lot of offerings, he has a labrang, a household with other monks in it that are supported. And people give a lot of offerings, which they accumulate. But when that monk passes away, when he dies, then who inherits all of it? So the way that system works is that, they look for the incarnation of that great teacher, bring the child back to the labrang, educate him well, and then he again heads the labrang and, is seen as a very respected teacher. Okay, so like I said, some of those People are highly realized, others may not be, which is why His Holiness the Dalai Lama always tells us to look at people's qualities, not at their titles and societal fame. Okay, but the Buddha, for sure, out of compassion appears when sentient beings need. But like I said, they don't wear name tags, and they aren't always easily identified. They appear just as kind of average human beings. Okay, does that answer the question? Okay. Okay. So last time we started talking a little bit about the reasons for taking refuge, and how refuge was the doorway into the Buddhist path. So today we'll continue on and talk a little bit about the mind's potential and the existence of the three jewels. And this section is not so long in terms of pages, but it's very, very profound. So I will try and do my best to explain it. It's and it's very inspiring to understand this, because His Holiness here explains through Nagarjuna's text how to prove the existence of the three jewels, and also how he explains how to show that full awakening is possible, that it's possible to become omniscient. Okay, so this is how His Holiness uses reasoning, to prove things, and encourages us to really think deeply and examine them, and not just take things out of blind faith. Okay, so if you have the book, I'm on the page 7 on the bottom. So before discussing the qualities of the three jewels, it is helpful to know the mind's potential and how mental purification occurs. These points were covered in chapter 12 of the previous volume, The Foundation of Buddhist Practice, and we will briefly review them now. So the greatest potential each sentient being has is to become a fully awakened Buddha who has the wisdom, compassion, and power to be of the greatest benefit of all sentient beings. So that is the greatest potential that we have. And all beings have it. Most of us have no idea that we have this potential. We think the best we can do is get a degree, get a job, have a nice house, have a family, and, maybe get a little bit of acknowledgement in our profession. But we don't, society doesn't tell us about our inner potential and ability to become Buddhas, but this is something that we have that's actually quite important. Okay, so that's our greatest potential. A key quality of a Buddha is omniscience. Okay, so the ability to simultaneously know all existence. How is attaining omniscience possible given our current state of ignorance? Now, when we think of how little we know now, the idea of becoming an omniscient Buddha who effortlessly knows everything that exists seems like, impossible. How can somebody, limited being like me ever become like that? Okay, so the mind has the natural capacity to cognize objects, but various obstructions prevent it from knowing phenomena. So when we ask, what is the definition of mind? It is that which is clear and cognizant. So just by the definition of mind, we know that it is formless, it's unimpeded, it has the ability to reflect objects and to cognize them, okay? And that is the nature of the mind. You know, these are qualities that cannot be removed from the mind in the same way that you cannot take heat away from fire because, you know, the nature of fire is hot. So, you know, we have that ability, the natural ability to cognize objects, but we have different obstructions to doing so. Okay, so first one obstruction is an intervening object like a wall that prevents us from seeing what is on the other side. So you're all sitting in rooms with walls. Look at a wall. The wall, you can't see on the other side of the wall, okay? The limit as to what we can cognize is due to the presence of an obstructive object that blocks our eyesight. Another obstruction is that the object is very far away or very small and is not within the purview of our sense faculties. So if, you know, we can maybe see out to the horizon, but beyond that, you know, it's too far away. We can't see. There are lots of other stars and planets and asteroids and so on in the universe, but even at night, we can't see them because they're too small or because they're, you know, beyond, they're far away so that there's no way that we can see them. Okay. A third obstruction is that our cognitive faculties are defective or limited in their scope. For our example, our visual consciousness cannot hear sounds. Okay, so, you know, we have sense consciousnesses, that's great, but each sense consciousness can only cognize its particular kind of object. Yeah, so the visual sense faculty, you know, facilitates cognizing sights, but, you know, it can't, the visual consciousness can't hear sounds, it can't smell anything. Yeah, so the cognitive faculties, the sense powers are limited. Yeah, and the visual, you know, the consciousnesses are as well as ordinary beings. If we have severe cataracts, we can barely see, and an animal brain is not equipped to comprehend philosophy. Okay, so if we have bad cataracts, we can't, you know, the object may be there, but we can't see it. If we have the brain of, let's say, an animal or whatever, then even the animal comes and listens to teachings, they don't have the ability to understand what the teachings are about. Okay, so we can see, you know, some of these obstacles to knowing things, I mean, they're very present in our lives. You know, we're quite familiar with them. A fourth one is a mind that is obscured by wrong views or one that is unable to concentrate because of an abundance of disturbing emotions. Yeah, that prevent it from understanding certain points. So if somebody in their mental consciousness is holding a lot of wrong views, okay, and we see this as an example, at least as in the political sphere. I don't know how much about Australian politics, but in the US, yeah, QAnon is running rampant. Politicians lie left, right, and center. People, you know, in many ways, they don't know what to believe. And when they go online, they hear all these crazy ideas. some said by politicians, some said by people who claim to have different powers, and some ideas that are just made up by people because they want to be famous. So if we buy into these kinds of ideas, then understanding the truth becomes very difficult, because we can see that people who hold on to wrong ideas very, very firmly, even if you explain what the truth is, they can't understand it. Okay, so to go back to political example, I really don't know anything about Australia, so forgive me if I use my own country. But here, I think the world is maybe kind of, you're aware of what's happened in America. So what's a good example? Oh, okay. So, Trump says the election was stolen, that the people miscounted ballots, that the voting machines weren't working, that people came in and with made up false ballots and put them in the box. And, none of this happened. There's been, over 60 court cases and people researching this. None of it has happened. And yet he believes it, I think, people, and he certainly convinces many other people to believe it. So as much as people say, look, here's proof that the voting machines are correct, and here's proof that, nobody dumped in extra ballots, these people, cannot hear and cannot understand. The mind is too locked into a wrong view. In a Dharma, way, if we have a very strong belief, let's say in a creator deity that is permanent, and we have very strong conviction in that, then even we hear, different Buddhist arguments, or we hear how the Buddha is not a creator, or we hear how karma creates our world, not a permanent creator. But if we really believe in that kind of creator, then really understanding certain Buddhist ideas is very, very difficult, because we're holding so strongly onto the truth of a wrong view. Okay, so there's unfortunately a lot of, illustrations of this kind of thing. So that's the fourth one. The fifth one is some objects are so subtle, vast, or profound that unless we have meditative concentration or super knowledges, we cannot know them. Okay, so some objects, very subtle, very huge and pervasive, or some subjects very profound, that unless we have an elevated state of mind in meditative concentration, then we cannot have access to this kind of information. Okay, so when we talk about the super knowledges, we're talking about different kind of supernatural powers that people gain through developing very, very deep states of samadhi. Because when people have very focused samadhi, they're suppressing all the distractions, and the afflictions, so they can see things more clearly. They can see things that are, very small or very subtle. They can understand things better because their mind is not cluttered with all the things that those of us in the desire, who have a desire realm mind, what we fill with our mind with, okay? So all day long, we're just interacting with sense objects. We're attached to our reputation. So we're thinking about what do other people think about me. We're attached to our wealth. So we're worried about, you know, do we have enough money to pay our taxes? Can we buy things? So our minds are filled with all these kinds of, you know, afflicted states that worry about the 8 worldly concerns. So, you know, concentrating our mind in meditation is, you know, extremely difficult for us. So, but there are some people who are able to develop deep states of samadhi, and those people gain certain physical powers. Yeah, they can make their body very big or very small. They, what else? Yeah, they can make their body invisible or visible again. You know, they can walk on water. They can fly through space. Yeah, so this comes about because of very deep concentration powers. Sorry, I have the hiccups. And then, then there's what's called the divine eye. And so this is the ability to see things in other parts of the universe that our normal eye cannot see, but with the mind's eye, we can see. There's another one called the divine ear, where we can hear things that are very far away that our regular ear sense can't hear. There's the ability to know our previous lives. There's the ability to know the death and rebirth of other living beings. So people can cultivate these kinds of powers, and that overcomes the obstacles to knowing these kind of very small or subtle or profound objects. And then the 6th obscuration that prevents us from knowing things is the latency of ignorance and the mistaken appearances that they cause that prevent the mind from knowing both veiled, or what we call conventional truths, and ultimate truths simultaneously by one consciousness. So only the mind of a Buddha can know both conventional truth and ultimate truth simultaneously, directly, with the same consciousness. All other beings, even very high bodhisattvas, cannot do this. You know, they may be able to see the 2 truths sequentially, but not at the same time with the same consciousness. So what impedes the bodhisattvas and the arhats from having the omniscient mind like this is what's called the latencies of ignorance. So they have removed the affliction of ignorance and the seed of ignorance, but there's a subtle trace or latency of the ignorance that remains, and it produces a subtle dualistic view and obscures the mind. And this is what has to be the high-level bodhisattvas have to overcome in order to become Buddhas, is these latencies of ignorance. Okay, so you can see that our mind actually, you know, by its very nature, can see all of these kinds of things, but there's certain obstacles, some of them external, some of them internal, that prevent us from cognizing. But, you know, those obstacles are all things that can be overcome, so that our mind can one day become omniscient. So from their side, Buddhas are not limited by the above obscurations, and having perfected their virtuous qualities, they have the ability to effortlessly and spontaneously manifest in limitless ways to benefit sentient beings. Okay, so those obscurations are gone. Yeah. And because of their meditative abilities, because of their spiritual realizations, and then motivated by compassion, then they can manifest in limitless ways to benefit sentient beings who have the karma to be receptive to their benefit, yeah, to their enlightening activities. However, Buddha's power is not omnipotent in the sense of being able to unilaterally control events. Our ability to be benefited by the Buddhas depends on our receptivity. Okay, so Buddhas are not all powerful. So when people talk about a creator God, usually they say God is omniscient, a quality that we attribute to the Buddha. But they say that God is omnipotent, all powerful. As Buddhists, we do not say that the Buddha is omnipotent. Why? Because if you had a holy being that had this great wisdom and this great compassion and was all powerful and could make anything happen, then this divine being would have stopped all of our samsaras long, long time ago. Yeah, because there's absolutely, from the perspective of a Buddha, there is no reason to keep sentient beings in samsara. So this is the question that often comes up for people who follow a theistic religion. Yeah, God is said to be the creator, but then you have to ask, well, if God is all powerful and can create anything, why did he create suffering? Yeah, why did he create ignorance and anger and jealousy and greed? Yeah, and you know, if God is all powerful, why did he create those? And if somehow he managed to, why doesn't he eliminate all of them if he is all powerful? And that presents a big puzzle for people who firmly believe in a permanent creator. Yeah, because those questions, you can't answer them really. Yeah. And I don't know about you, those were the kind of questions I asked in Sunday school when I was little. And I was usually told, it's mysterious, it's beyond our understanding. You know, it all kind of boiled down to don't ask. And if you ask, just have faith. You know, just believe because somebody told you. But I couldn't do that. And I suspect that some of you also cannot just go for blind faith in that way. Okay, so our ability to benefit from the presence of the Buddhas and their enlightening activities is due to our receptivity. So an example is given, which I think is quite a good example. If you have a bowl and the bowl is upside down, okay, the sun may be shining, it may be a perfectly clear, beautiful day. The sun is shining, but if the bowl is upside down, no sunlight can get inside. So that is not due to a problem with the sunlight. It's due to difficulty with the bowl. So in the same way, you know, from the perspective of a Buddha who is emanating, enlightening activity all the time, if our minds are closed, then it's like the sunlight can't get into the upside down bowl. The Buddha's activities cannot influence us. Okay, so that this comes because of our accumulated karma, happens because of our habitual afflictions that we have. Okay, so however brilliant the sun may be, its radiance cannot enter an upside down vessel. Similarly, our karmic obscurations or our lack of merit curtail the Buddha's ability to help us. But when the vessel is turned upright, when it's cleaned, then, the sunlight can flow in and it can be reflected on the sides of the bowl. So similarly, when we purify our minds and accumulate merit, our minds become receptive to the Buddha's awakening activities. And you may have noticed that, those of you who've been going to Vajrayana Institute for many years, that sometimes new people come, and some people, it's like they listen to a teaching and it's like, wow, this is incredible. And other people are there and hear the same teacher teaching and go, what in the world are they talking about? Yeah, have you noticed that at all? Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Yeah. And it's because of, how if people have the karma to be receptive to what's going on. Okay, as our understanding of the mind increases, we will gain conviction in 3 points. Okay, so these are things that we will begin to understand. First, the basic nature of the mind is pure and clear. Okay, so the basic nature of the mind is undefiled. Yeah, and the afflictions and so on are not in the nature of the mind. Okay. So it's like, heat is the nature of fire, but dirt is not the nature of a dirty cloth. Yeah, because the dirt can be removed and you still have the cloth. Okay, so first, the basic nature of the mind is pure and clear. Second, afflictions are based on ignorance that apprehends phenomena as existing in the opposite way than they actually exist. Okay, so let me finish reading this point and then I'll explain it. So thus, ignorance and the afflictions born from it are adventitious and do not inhere in the nature of the mind. Okay, so why do we have various afflictions and disturbing emotions? They're all rooted in ignorance. What is it that makes ignorance so dangerous and so powerful to obscure our mind? Is it sees phenomena as existing in the exact opposite way than they actually exist. Okay, so it's like something is yellow in color and people see it as purple, the exact opposite on the color wheel. So phenomena exist dependently. They depend on causes and conditions. They depend on parts. They depend on the mind that conceives and designates them. Yeah, but our ignorance does not cognize objects that are dependent. It projects some kind of independent nature on these objects being, other phenomena, and even ourselves. So that, because our mind is clouded, we see objects as having an inherent nature, whereas they do not. Yeah. We see objects existing in a very concrete, independent way, when in actual fact, they are malleable and changeable and not, concrete in any way. Okay. So as our understanding of the mind increases, we begin to understand what ignorance is and how ignorance obscures our mind. And by understanding the first point, that the nature of the mind is clear and pure, then we see that because ignorance apprehends things that do not, it apprehends independent objects, whereas objects are dependent, so because it apprehends things in an erroneous manner, when we can cultivate a mind that sees things correctly, that wisdom that sees things correctly overpowers ignorance and can eventually cut the root of ignorance, so that we are always seeing things correctly, never seeing things in an obscured way. And when we can see things truthfully, like, correctly like that, then the other afflictions, greed and jealousy and arrogance and so on, these things are all based on that fundamental lie that ignorance has created of independent things. So when ignorance as the root of the afflictions is cut, then the various afflictions and disturbing emotions also are cut. They are removed from the mind. Okay, so that's how it's possible to purify our mind and completely change our mind from the way it is right now. And I think it's so important for us to realize these qualities of mind and that we can change things, because, under the influence of ignorance right now, the way we see ourselves is in such a very limited, constricted way. Our self-image is like this time, we think we're this, like, it's so constricted that it can't say anything. Yeah, because we're seeing, we think, when we think of ourselves, that there is an independent me there. I am here. And because there's this independent, solid feeling of me, then automatically we think that me, that I, is more important. Okay, don't you think that you're more important than everybody else? You can be honest. We're with friends. Yeah, we all have that problem, don't we? Yeah, we think we're the most important ones. Yeah, and why do we have problems in life? Because other people do not realize that we're the most important ones, and that they should actually do everything that pleases us. But they don't understand that. So they have their own ideas and they do what they want to do. And doing that causes us so many problems. So, and that's the way we see it, isn't it? When we have a problem, it's always somebody else's fault, isn't it? Yeah. We burnt the toast, but it's the fault of the toaster. It's the fault of the person who used the toaster before us, who didn't clean it properly. It's the fault of the person who made the toaster so that it burns things. But me, it's I'm not guilty of burning the toast. Okay. So, yeah. So this self-view is really quite limited. And because we think that we are fixed and permanent and cannot change, we say, well, I just have a bad temper. That's me. I have a bad temper. So if you're going to be around me, just get used to it. There's nothing I can do about it. I just have a bad temper. So we see something like a bad temper. We think, oh, that's who I am. That's some kind of attribute that is deep inside me and can never be removed from me. So therefore, when I get angry, I actually have no responsibility for my anger because that's just the way I am. Okay. Do you have certain things that you tell yourself? Well, that's the way I am and I can't change. Yeah. So other people just better get used to it. Okay. So this idea of we hold of ourselves is actually, it's very erroneous. It's not correct at all. Okay. So the first thing we would understand is as our understanding of the mind increases, is that the basic nature of the mind is pure and clear. Second, the afflictions are based on ignorance that apprehend phenomena as in existing the opposite way than they actually exist. Yeah. And third, it is possible to cultivate powerful antidotes, realistic and beneficial mental states that root out the ignorance, afflictions, and other obscurations. So the third thing is that these obscurations are not, inherent in the nature of our mind. They are things that also depend on causes and conditions. And when we develop a more realistic attitude and we develop our wisdom so that we can see things more accurately, then that wisdom overpowers the ignorance, overpowers the distortion of these afflictive states of mind. And so it's possible to eliminate them. Okay. So if you tell yourself, I can't do anything about my temper, that's just the way I am, that is not true. Okay. Getting angry at people is based on not perceiving them properly. So when we develop some wisdom and we can begin to see things properly, even on the conventional level, let alone on the ultimate level, then, the power of our anger decreases. Okay, so this is one section I think that is like incredibly important for us to understand as Buddhist practitioners. If we don't understand this about the mind, then the whole idea of awakening, of Buddhahood, just seems like a fairy tale. But if we understand this about the mind, then we develop some confidence that we can actually develop the wisdom and remove these obscurations. So now His Holiness is going to switch to a slightly different topic but that is related. And here he's going to show how it's possible, how you can prove the existence of the three jewels. So he's basing this on chapter 24 of Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way, which is one of the most renowned topics that is studied in all of the Tibetan monasteries. Okay, so this Nagarjuna explains that together, the doctrines of dependent arising and emptiness of inherent existence, together, these two doctrines, can establish the existence of the three jewels. Okay. So I know when I began studying Buddhism, one of the big questions I had was, how do I know the Buddha exists? You know, people tell me the Buddha exists, but how do I know the Buddha exists? So this is the kind of argument that can answer that question. Okay, so here's how it starts. Because all phenomena arise dependently. Okay, so they're dependent on causes and conditions, on parts, and on our mind that conceives and designates them. So because all phenomena arise dependently, they lack inherent existence. So inherent existence is synonymous with independent existence. In other words, existing independent of everything else. And dependent and independent existence are totally contradictory. Something can't be both. Okay. So because things arise dependently, they cannot be independent and they cannot have inherent existence. Okay, so think about it. Do things arise dependently? Yeah, do you exist depending on other things? Yeah, do you exist depending? Well, you depend on your mother and your father. You depend on all the food that you ate. Yeah, you depend on having a body. You depend on having different mental faculties. Okay, so you depend on a lot of different things. So, you know, we can't be kind of one solid person, permanent person with a permanent soul. Yeah, why? Because we, you know, are dependent and we're affected by other causes and conditions and we change. Yeah. So haven't you changed since we started this talk? Have you changed in the last hour and 10 minutes? Or are you exactly the same person you were an hour and 10 minutes ago? You've changed, haven't you? Okay, so change is happening. It's just the nature of things. Okay, so because all phenomena arise dependently, they lack inherent existence. Ignorance, however, grasps them to exist in the opposite way as inherently existent. Yeah, so things are dependent. Ignorance grasps them as existing the opposite way, as independent and inherently existent. Because phenomena exist dependent on other factors, sprouts depend on seeds, children depend on their parents. So, okay, so because phenomena exist dependent on other factors, they do not exist independently or inherently. When wisdom realizes their emptiness, emptiness meaning the emptiness of inherent or independent existence. So when wisdom realizes that, it has the power to gradually eradicate ignorance and its latencies from our mind. So when we cut the root, we cut off ignorance, then the different afflictions cease. When the afflictions cease, they can no longer motivate us to do actions that are negative and that, or even to do virtuous actions that are polluted. We can no longer create polluted actions. Polluted mean being polluted by ignorance. And so when ignorance, afflictions, and then karma cease, then we are no longer reborn in samsara. Okay, so that's how our samsara, we're able to stop our dukkha, our unsatisfactory conditions in samsara. So this wisdom is true paths, the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, and the cessations of the afflictions and dukkha are true cessations. More specifically, a true cessation is the purified aspect of the emptiness of a mind that has removed a portion of afflictions by means of its antidote, a true path. Okay, so the true paths are the antidotes that can remove, starting with very coarse levels of afflictions and ignorance, and then going down to gradually overcoming even the subtler levels of ignorance and afflictions. So true paths and true cessations, these are the last two of the Four Noble Truths. They constitute the Dharma Jewel. And in this way, the existence of the Dharma Jewel, which is the actual refuge, is established. So we always say that the Dharma Jewel is the actual refuge, because when we actualize true cessations and true paths in our own minds, then we overcome our afflictions and the dukkha that the afflictions cause. Okay, so that these two, the true paths, true cessations, are the Dharma Jewel, and the Dharma Jewel is the thing that we want to actualize in our own mind. Yeah, because that wisdom is what will actually solve our problems. So true paths are first generated and true cessations are first actualized on the path of seeing of all three vehicles: the Shravaka or hearer vehicle, solitary realizer or Pratyeka Buddha vehicle, and the Bodhisattva vehicle. Okay, so in these three vehicles, there are 5 paths that are 5 levels of having seen emptiness or reality, and levels of overcoming various kinds of innate and acquired afflictions. Okay, so the true paths and true cessations exist in the minds of Aryas. Okay, an Arya is somebody who's realized reality directly and non-conceptually. So they exist in the minds of Aryas on the paths of seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So these are the last 3 of the 5 paths of these 3 spiritual practitioners. Those that have directly perceived emptiness and actualized true cessations are Aryas. Okay, so people who have realized the truth path and used it to remove portions of the afflictions on their mind, yeah, they become the Sangha Jewel. Okay, because they've realized the nature of reality and they're using that realization to purify their own minds. Okay, so first we established the existence of the Dharma Jewel. Then, because the Dharma Jewel exists, there exists the Sangha Jewel, people who have recognized or realized the truth paths and true cessations. Okay. And when bodhisattvas overcome all obscurations, they become Buddhas and the Buddha Jewel. So that's how we know that the Buddha jewel exists. Okay, so the Buddha jewel arises from the Sangha jewel from the Dharma jewel. Yeah, the Dharma jewel from wisdom. And this wisdom is wisdom that realizes the dependent and empty of inherent existent nature of all persons and phenomena. Okay, so by first establishing that everything is dependent and therefore is not inherently existent, then we can establish the wisdom that realizes that reality, the Dharma jewel, the Sangha jewel, the Buddha jewel. Yeah, this argument is like, whoa. So, it's going to take a bit of it, going over and thinking about this to really kind of get it. Okay, so in this way, the existence of the three jewels is established, and the possibility of our becoming the three jewels is demonstrated. Okay. When we deeply contemplate Nagarjuna's explanation, our faith in the three jewels grows, not because someone told us about them or because we admire them, but because we understand the possibility of mental development that can lead to actualizing the three jewels ourselves. Okay, so as Buddhists, we believe in the existence of the three jewels. It's not blind faith. We've really thought about these things and we're convinced that they exist and that it's impossible for us to become them. The ideal way to take refuge in the three jewels entails some degree of understanding of emptiness and dependent arising. Of course, we may initially take refuge for more elementary reasons, but our refuge will deepen as our understanding of the three jewels increases. Another way of speaking of the Dharma is in terms of the transmitted or scriptural Dharma, that's one, and the realized Dharma. So the teachings given by the Buddha are the transmitted Dharma because they are transmitted from one person to the other, from one generation to the next. Okay, so the teachings given by the Buddha are the transmitted Dharma. The realizations that arise in the minds of practitioners who practice the transmitted Dharma are the realized Dharma. Okay, so the realizations that we gain through our practice, the true paths and true sensations that we gain are the realized Dharma. So currently, both the transmitted and realized Dharma are present in our world. To preserve the transmitted Dharma, we must study the Dharma by listening to oral teachings and reading scriptures, treatises, and commentaries. To preserve the realized Dharma, we must meditate and actualize these teachings in our own minds. We should not take the existence of the Dharma for granted, but make a personal contribution to preserving it. So instead of thinking, oh, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are great, they're always going to be here, the teachings are always going to be here, I'm a little bit busy this week, I can't go listen to teachings, and I can't do my regular meditation practice because I have all these other things I need to do, So we forget about the transmitted Dharma, we forget about our practice. And we take them for granted that they're always going to be here. But the existence of the Dharma in our world depends on people learning the Dharma, practicing it, transmitting it to other people, and gaining the realizations of the Dharma. And so His Holiness is saying, we all have some responsibility to do this. Yeah. We may not be advanced practitioners, but we can do our little bit to preserve the Dharma by studying it well and not generating wrong ideas. Yeah, but actually learning the Dharma well and checking our understanding and making sure it's correct. And that's a huge contribution to the existence of the Dharma, because then when we talk to other people about the Dharma teachings, even we're just telling a friend something simple about calming their mind, what we'll say is something correct and truthful, and that's very important to do. Okay. So we have a few more minutes left. Do you have comments or questions? So is there an effective way to
clear Abrahamic residue so that we hear teachings correctly?
Okay, the Abrahamic theistic philosophy. Okay.
Yeah.
The best way to do that is a practice where we do purification practices, such as prostrations and Vajrasattva recitation, mandala offerings, things like that, to do purification, to create merit, by doing virtuous actions, and then to think very, very deeply about the Dharma that you have heard and put it into practice, because it's only by this way of learning what is correct and then thinking about it again and again and again and familiarizing our mind with it, and making sure that what we're familiarizing our mind with is a correct understanding of the Dharma. When we do that, and then we also do purification practices and creation of merit, then we can clear these kinds of wrong views and misunderstandings. Okay, so there's no pill to take that's going to clear it all. Yeah, because if you think about it, these kind of views have been imprinted in our minds, even in this life, depending upon how you grew up, what you were taught by your parents, and, if you went to church or temple when you were little, and what they taught you, and what you understood. So, if it's ingrained in us for a long time, then we're going to have to really familiarize our mind and contemplate these issues so that we really get the correct idea and become familiar with that. Okay, so it takes time and energy, and putting in the time and energy is well worth it, because when you can clear these things, then you can understand the Dharma so much better.
It was it was taken from when you were talking about being able to develop cities and things like that. So the question is, have you, Venerable Children, witnessed any examples of someone with these special powers? Because it can be hard to relate to these when it's unfamiliar to our experience.
So people with those supernatural powers. Okay. Again, people who have these powers, the real people who are real humble in their practice, they don't display these powers publicly. And they don't talk about them. They have them, they use them, but they don't talk about them. And the reason this is, I should say, they may upon occasion use them so that people see that, or they may say to a specific disciple something, but in general, no, because our minds, if we saw somebody do some kind of act that seemed kind of magical to us, we would get so excited. Oh, look, they made something appear out of their sleeve. They did this. This is fantastic. Call the newspaper, call the radio. Let's get this guy interviewed. He should be on TV. And then the whole press comes and starts, videoing and interviewing. And, it becomes chaos. It doesn't become benefit. Yeah. And some people have these powers, but they have them only through developing samadhi, concentration. They still have minds with afflictions. So some people may have powers and then they brag about them so that other people give them money and other people make them famous and they get a certain reputation for having psychic powers. Yeah. But for example, in our monastic precepts, if we lie about supernatural powers, yeah, we lose our ordination. It's cut from the root. We are no longer a monk or a nun. There's a secondary precept that we transgress if we talk about supernormal powers, even if we have them. So even if we're telling the truth and we talk about them just publicly, that's a transgression of another precept. So the Buddha, didn't want his disciples kind of going around with, oh, I saw your past life and I'm seeing your future life. And, that wasn't the Buddha's idea for his disciples. Okay. So as for me, have I seen these things? To tell you the truth, I don't look for these things very much. Yeah. For me, what I look for is a person kind? Is a person compassionate? Do they, can you feel like they have an accurate idea or understanding of emptiness? So I look for those kind of qualities, not the supernatural ones. Because to me, it's, it's of much greater benefit for if somebody has compassion or somebody has wisdom than being able to tell me what my past life was, like, okay, I was that in a past life. Yeah. Then so what? Yeah. What's more important is how am I acting in this life? Then we will stop here. Okay. And I'm going to skip the next section next time and go. The next section is about the 3 jewels according to the fundamental vehicle. And instead, we're going to go to the 3 jewels according to the perfection vehicle. And so to understand how the Tibetan tradition describes the 3 jewels. So we'll go into that, really talking about what the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are. So stay tuned for next month.